What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Breaking Bet here on this Wednesday, October 30th. Coming up on a little Halloween action. Week 9, NFL on deck right here. The season is moving along. It's going to be a nice little breakdown of the slate. Brought in my guy, Eric Pauly, to help me do so. What's going on, big dog?
What's poppin', brother? I was telling you off air, just confirmed I'm going to see my guy, Jaden Daniels, play live on Sunday. Literally got the confirmation less than an hour ago, so I'm excited as hell for that. Obviously excited for another week in the books. Always happy to be here, brother.
Yeah, it was a strange week 8. What have you made from this NFL season so far? Every week we talk about the same breakdowns of games and everything like that. But have you honestly and truly been entertained with what's going on in the NFL this season?
There have been some times I'm literally writing in my group chats with my friends, like, why do we even pretend like we like this sport? Like, why are we watching this? Like, I'd rather do like so many other things than sit on my couch and watch football. But then, of course, you do have some banger games. Obviously, what Washington did to, win and make that game as exciting as it possibly could be. Thursday night football was fun. Like, it was the first week, though, where we saw in the witching hour on the 1 o'clock, all those games coming down to, within one score type of games besides Philly-Cincy. But there were a bunch of games that were, really, really tight and really electric. So actually Tennessee-Detroit as well. But there were a lot of fun games. So, I think it's like something like Big Cat from Barstool would say, like, you got to get through those shitty games because in 4 months from now, 5 months from now, we're going to be sitting there just watching, NBA, some college basketball. Yeah, we'll be having a great time. We're going to be missing football. So even though it's been kind of ugly and shitty, and there are times I'm literally like, why do I even pretend to like this sport? Nah, it holds a special place in the heart. But there have been some games that are just abysmal to watch. I 100% agree. What about you, Johnny?
We're going to be watching college baseball, which is something I can't wait for. I think everybody knows that, but I don't know, man. In my honest opinion, overall, the NFL has just gotten worse over the years. And I'm trying to be objective and trying to be straight up, and it's what I truly believe. I think the product gets worse every year. It's just on a slow decline of how bad it is as a whole. But I will say there are some moments. There has been different times where you're like, all right, this is the NFL we grew up on. This game was electric. Like the finish of that Dallas-San Francisco game, it was a tale of two halves. It was a snooze fest in the first half, and then the second half was electric. The ending of the Washington – I mean, honestly, for the first 59 minutes of that Washington-Chicago game really wasn't that good. And then the Hail Mary just completely changes the narrative. So, I'm a little partial to it. I think one of the things that is controllable and is contributing to why it's so bad is the refereeing. The penalties are disgusting. It's terrible. And the problem is the league does nothing to fix it. So, I wish there would be a real effort to clean that up. There was 23 penalties in I forget what game it was this weekend, but there was 23 penalties in a game. That can't happen. That should not be happening. Hopefully this week we get a little bit better of play and product on the field.
Especially when they miss like egregious calls, like the literal face mask to end the game. Like, am I saying that, like, I didn't have money on that game, so I'm not even saying it from like a betting perspective. I'm saying it from an objective fan watching a sport perspective. The game ends on a clear face mask that you cannot review. Like, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And then tag on the other ticky-tacky things that happen. Sometimes I do agree with you. I'm watching the NFL and I'm like what? Like, I'm not having fun. I wish I was playing Madden.
And you know what the worst part is like and this is whether you believe it or not. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. Whether you believe or not that there's heavy influence in with the sports betting and it's fixed or it's rigged or there's influence from the league and the referees, whatever side of that you're on, all you need to know is, in particular with that Thursday game, which honestly was a pretty good game. It was the Rams-Vikings was a pretty good game. Like we don't have many good Thursday night games, and that was one of the outliers this year in terms of the quality and the entertainment aspect of it. But that game where it ends on the safety, which Darnold clearly got his face mask grabbed in perfect vision of the referee, there was 48s and 48.5 point totals out there. And that pushed it towards the over. That safety created the over. And so that's why I think people, get riled up, and I understand it. And like you, I didn't have anything on that game. So this is more just from a football fan perspective. That kind of stuff can't happen. And you get these weird things that I can't even necessarily constitute as a bad beat, because sometimes I think that is intentional. And, that's a completely different conversation. But, that is really where it grinds my gears the most.
And what grinds my gears the most about it is like the fact that a clear and obvious penalty is unreviewable or unchangeable. Like, it's not like it's pass interference where it's like debatable. Like, it doesn't get more literal crystal clear as you pull somebody's face mask. That's a face mask penalty. So I know we could talk about this. We could have a whole 3-hour show just talking about this, Johnny. Obviously, the people want to hear some week 9 best bets. But yeah, the fact that something so clear and obvious was, one, missed, 2, that you can't change, like a literal thing that is occurring. I have no words at this point, honestly.
Yeah. Well, as we're getting into week 9 here, give me your favorite look on the board.
Favorite look on the board, Washington -3.5. I'm actually seeing some 4s pop up, but I could dive into that when we talk a little bit more. I actually, as last week, I didn't really love the board, so I kind of really kept it light. I played like 3 total game lines all of last week, maybe 4 at max. So Washington -3.5 is up there for me, as well as Los Angeles Rams -1.5. Those are 2 of my favorite looks this week. What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you on that Washington look. I'm also seeing. Sorry, let me find it. Where is it? Indianapolis Colts, Roman +5.5 at the Minnesota Vikings. We'll dive into that game a little bit later, but the Colts just made the switch. They're benching Anthony Richardson. That's another debate that we could have, whether that's the right decision or the wrong decision. But what we do know for a fact is Joe Flacco has looked very good, and Indianapolis has looked like a different team when he's been under center. So catching almost a touchdown, but being in the Royal Mint spot at Minnesota, who is starting to fade a little bit, I think this is a really, really interesting spot to take the Colts. But we'll definitely dive into that one in a little bit here. And we start off with Thursday Night Football. The Houston Texans suddenly shorthanded at the New York Jets. Where are you going?
New York Jets. I love the Jets. It's not even a spot, like, numbers wise. I make it Jets -0.25. So I missed the boat. I'm actually showing value with Houston at this point, but I'm throwing everything out the window. There's not a single human being let me put it this way. I don't care if the Houston Texans win by 40. It's obviously the square side. I deal with a lot of recreational bettors that I talk to, friends, family, people in different communities. And I also have communities of sharp bettors that I'm friends with and speak with. And I have not heard a single person whose opinion I do not respect say that they like the New York Jets. We saw the Lions open as Texans, then back to Jets, then back to Texans, now firmly back to the Jets being favorites here. I don't expect buyback from the Houston side. We've talked a ton ad nauseum about the Houston Texans' problems, and now Stephon Diggs is out. Like, their offense is really crippled. CJ Stroud's also struggled on the road and outdoors in his career. The New York Jets did not deserve to lose that football game, but them losing that game, as you saw those statistics, was literally the anomaly. It was not like they literally were like the first team out of like almost 800 of teams to lose in the scenario where they didn't turn the ball over, scored 3 touchdowns, and had all those other metrics. I don't have it on hand with me. I think the Jets' offense is actually really good. The Houston Texans' offense, as we've noted many times before, is lackluster. And then again, now losing Diggs. Can Mixon have a good running game on this Jets defense? Yes, sure, fine. This is a New York Jets spot for me. Don't care if to me, it's pretty simple. I think this is like a prototypical pros versus Joes kind of game. Every square human being in the world is looking at this game saying, how the hell are the Texans getting points here? And they're betting the Texans. And I think that's a telltale sign that the New York Football Jets are winning this game outright.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Houston, and I've been saying that we talk about this every week. I've been saying this since the jump. Like, Houston has not looked impressive to me at all this year. Even against the Patriots, I felt like they left meat on the bone. I haven't looked at Houston one time this year. I'm like, yeah, this is the team that can win the Super Bowl or even represent the AFC. We know it's got a lot of talent, but now it's taken some hits. Diggs is out for the year. That was their prized free agent acquisition. Nico Collins, he's missed the last few weeks. I mean, I think he's expected to be back in the near future. And now you're running out Tank Dell as your wide receiver one. I do love Tank Dell. I think he's a very talented player, but this is a guy that I think is, most people would agree, has failed to live up to that year two jump. And part of the reason why Mixon has been so good this year is because of the amount of weapons you have in the pass catching game. And now there's going to be a lot more king on the run. Again, I still think, like you said, I think Mixon can have a good game here, but I don't know, man. CJ Stroud doesn't look the same. And I know we're talking about the Jets that just lost to New England, which, by the way, we talked about last week. I said the Patriots either get blown outright or they get blown out, or they went outright, and they won outright. And, I feel like the Jets here on a short week at home against a short-handed Houston team, I feel like this is the spot that I would want to take it. Obviously, the Jets can lose, but I think, in my honest opinion, I think this is a game where it's not going to be close. I think whoever wins is going to win by probably double-digit points.
No, I mean, I could see it. It's, again, like, not going to be more than a one-unit play for me at this point. But back at the Jets, so this isn't like a nuts on the table favorite look of the week, New York Jets. And obviously, they're a team I hate to put my money on, considering if you listen to any words I've said for the past, not just offseason, but last 2 years, realistically, about how I think the Jets are not a good football team and will not be a good football team, regardless of the Aaron Rodgers, everything, et cetera. And that's obviously clearly come into fruition. This is a New York Jets spot, especially considering what the market is telling us. Can there be buyback in Houston? The Houston Texans are 2-point favorites on, at 8:05 on tomorrow night prior to this game kicking off. And then maybe that would be an indication that, the Sharps are kind of just waiting on limits to rise, like potentially 100%. But based on the market movement and the public sentiment, I'll gladly eat a loss on the New York Jets. I'm back in the Jets this weekend. I mean, this weekend, tomorrow.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think right now the Indianapolis Colts can come steal this AFC South with Flacco under center?
That's why they put him under there, because they believe they can. I still think the defense that they run is very outdated, and that's going to be their Achilles heel, is their inability to get stops against good teams down the stretch. That being said, if I'm not mistaken, the Colts do not have that difficult of a schedule moving forward for the rest of the season. So, no, I would not sit here and be shocked at all. Clearly, the organization sees that. Anthony Richardson was becoming Bryce Young levels of borderline unplayable. Obviously, he has more potential from his body standpoint, his athleticism standpoint, and the fact that he's not really played a lot of football in his entire life, realistically. He's still a raw-ass project. I hate the Josh Allen comparisons for so many reasons, because Josh Allen's growth from year 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, where he really made that leap and is obviously the MVP candidate he's been the last couple of years. He's the exception to the rule. He is not the rule. Expecting Anthony Richardson, just saying he hasn't played enough football, like he'll be good, like you need to develop him. Him sitting out that one play, as much as that seems insignificant to me, is a major red flag. Obviously, Irsay as an owner is a very outspoken and is pulling the strings there too, which is probably why he's like, we're a 500 team, like we can win these football games, like we should be better, and Joe gives us a better chance to win. That's absolutely true. I think that and also another point on that, like we as analysts, fans, bettors, et cetera, formulate our opinions, but realistically, who has the better view of what's going on? Us who sees what happens on Sunday, or the guys who see them in the building every single freaking day? Anthony Richardson gets hurt every time he runs. They can't even utilize the best part of his skill set. Like he's the true boomer bust with the deep ball, but he can't complete a 3-yard out route. Like he is a project. That's great. Do I think that the Colts are a little bit short-sighted by going to Flacco and trying to win now? Yes, I think both things can be true, but no, Johnny, to answer your question, Johnny, I would not be shocked to see the Colts come and make a run in this AFC South.
I think, they're plus 850 right now with the Texans being minus 850. If you look at it, Indianapolis has a game at Minnesota this weekend. It's not as unwinnable And as difficult of a matchup now, as you would have said 4 weeks ago, then the next week they're home to the Bills. I mean, that's a game that they probably lose. Then they're at the Jets. That is a winnable game right now. Then they're home to the Lions, a game that they would probably lose. But then they're at New England, at Denver, home to Tennessee, at the Giants, home to the Jags. I mean, obviously they don't have the tiebreaker because they got swept by Houston.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely makes for something more appealing where the Texans this week on the short week have the Jets in MetLife. That's a tough game. Then they're home to the Lions next week. Primetime, that's a tough game. Then they're at Dallas. Then they're home to Tennessee. Yeah, primetime as well. They have 3 straight primetime games. Then they're home to Tennessee. Then they're at the Jaguars. Then they're home to Miami. Then they're at Kansas City. Then they're home to Baltimore. That's all within a 10-day stretch, by the way. Then they finish at Tennessee. So realistically, they can lose possibly 5 of these games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think right now, Indianapolis at plus 850. It's not even just what the Texans' schedule looks like. It's how they've been playing football. And now they're down one of their best players in Diggs for the year. Nico Collins is coming back from an injury, and you don't even know what he's going to look like. I mean, I will say the Colts right now, and you'd have to take it before Thursday. Right now, the Colts to win the AFC South is a good bet.
I'm with you.
It's Joe Flacco's team.
Yeah, no, I don't have a ton to add to that. I'm with you. I'm entirely with you that it's worth looking at 100%.
Next game is the New England Patriots at the Tennessee Titans. So you know how much the road or the favorite laying 3.5 means to me now. Like my second favorite play behind the Royal Mint. Most of the time it hit. It's been hitting this year. Only a couple times it hasn't hit. Like the first time was Miami week 1. I don't even know if Green Bay closed. I think Green Bay may have closed 3.5, and they lost. So really, it's only a couple times that it hasn't hit. But I think now this week, this is a good time to fade that. Do you know why?
Lay it on me.
We're buying this trend where the team that plays Detroit the previous week gets smoked the following week. So I'm actually inclined to fade it. But honestly, like the Titans, the last 2 weeks, the Titans, at least in the first half, have shown some kind of heart. And obviously they're playing the Bills and the Lions. But, New England's got some interesting stuff. I'd obviously wait to see what happens with Drake May before I take this plunge here. But if Drake May is good to go, I think New England here, even on the money line, is something that I would be interested in.
Well, the thing about the whole Drake May, Jacoby Brissett, everything, and obviously that game at MetLife, like we talked about last week, how Gerard Mayo called out his team. I wasn't really sure how they were going to respond to that, if it was going to be positive. And again, like the Jets were in a situation where literally 700 plus teams in that same situation or in games like won those games, and they're the only ones to lose that. I think it's more of an indictment on the Jets than the Patriots being good, especially considering if you watch that game, which I did actually watch a solid portion of. Like New England, like this is like the whole problem with, and why I love New England to be one of the worst teams in football this year, and why I wasn't in love with the May, with him playing so quickly, even though he looks good. He objectively looks like a good football player. Their pass catchers stink, and they don't just stink, like they're god awful. Like Drake May put a couple of balls on guys, and even Brissett did too, and they're just dropping first downs. They're dropping, 10, 15, 20-yard plays down the field, and that's the concern. That's been the concern, that they don't have enough juice, enough skill players to kind of maintain and to really prosper as a team. Then also expecting the defense to progress because no Belichick, and they were just a bad unit of players. They played well because they had the best defensive coach ever coaching them last year. So I make this game actually Tennessee minus 2.5. So I do see clear value with New England, though, like you said, I would definitely want to see injury reports on Drake May versus Brissett, because the Titans' defensive metrics underlying are solid. And I get the Detroit thing, but again, obviously it's situational. So it's not like the Lions. Like I feel like that trend was more so the thought process behind it was the Lions. They bully you up front, they beat you up, so that next week you're a little bit more sore, a little bit more beat up than you normally were against another team because the Lions are so physical on both sides of the ball. But the Lions did their winning on special teams. It's not like the offense was not like the Tennessee Titans defense was out there for 45 minutes, got absolutely run up and down on defensively. Like they were getting killed on special teams. So I don't know if situationally if I'd be backing said system for this particular matchup. That being said, I see value on New England. Would love to see what's going on with Drake May. Mason Rudolph is clearly an upgrade over Will Levis, though I think the way that that Rudolph and Ridley moved the football was more of an indictment on the Lions defense, which we'll talk about when we break down that Packers game. But no, I'm with you that this is a New England spot for me if I'm looking to take some points here, and I would consider the money line, but not considering it as the Lions spot is not personally part of why I would be leaning toward New England here.
Yeah, for sure. Another barn burner. New Orleans Saints laying 7.5 at Carolina. It looks like it's going to be Bryce Young again. I mean, I'm probably not going to do anything in this game, at least right now. But I would definitely lay it with New Orleans 7.5. I realize it's a lot of points, but we don't know how many more chances we're going to get to fade Bryce Young. I did that with Denver this week. As bad as you think a team is, they are not as bad as Carolina. Now without Deontay Johnson, who got sent over to Baltimore, this is just going from really bad to even worse. So I think New Orleans here is the spot, even though this big spread.
So I agree. New Orleans teaser would obviously be a look here for obvious reasons as well. And I like that you just mentioned that, Johnny, because I have only been power rating for about 3 years now when I started getting into trying to create my own numbers and see how I can do in that regard and try to keep up with that. So I didn't get to see the 0-16 Lions team or Browns team, those terrible teams. I didn't have numbers on them. So in my very brief time making numbers, this Panthers team is by far the lowest power rated team I've ever created. And even that probably isn't low enough. Bryce Young, we've talked about ad nauseum, doesn't take us to tell you how bad he is. He's chart breaking bad, where you see graphs of quarterbacks, they have to exclude him because he just makes it unviewable because of how far toward the negative end of said graphs he normally is. The thing is, the Saints, though, they're a dumpster fire. Dennis Allen is an awful head coach. Obviously Rattler is not, good enough. This defense has its flaws, but there's nothing about Carolina. It's not like Bryce Young where he's had, a couple decent games where it's this is the spot, they're at home, divisional game, they're going to rile up and get it. Nah, he is bad. They don't have the weapons for him to be good. I'm with you. I would maybe look at Xavier Legette props because he's the only guy that I think has some flash now. I know Jalen Coker is getting a lot of love just in the fantasy world, and overall he's an undrafted free agent, but he's played well with Carolina so far. The Saints, though, with Dennis Allen's not a team that I'm dying to lay the 7.5 with, but in a teaser, I'm teasing New Orleans down all day long.
Be interested in alt spread here. Maybe take New Orleans, something I don't know, minus 16.5 at plus 260.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you, bro. I don't blame you for a second.
Yeah, it's bad. The Panthers' offense is so bad that Sean Payton, after Sunday's blowout win with Denver's blowout win, Sean Payton said, "Yeah, that's a bad offense, an oppressor." That doesn't coaches, even, there's courtesy. It's they're still getting better. They're learning. No, they're not. That's not happening right now. So that's why it goes to show how bad they really are. All right. Denver at Baltimore, 9.5 points. Last week was not surprising. The both of us said the Cleveland Browns getting 9.5 points at home against Baltimore was way too many points. That was absolutely a Cleveland spot. I don't think for a second either of us liked the Ravens laying that many at the Browns. Here they are laying a big number at home to Denver. Denver has shown a lot of potential and a lot of promise. I think a lot of that has to do with the schedule they've faced. Bo Nix is getting better every week. There's a lot of little details, decision-making, different things that we're noticing, throwing mechanics, whatever the case is. But I don't think the Ravens are going to mess around here. I think the Ravens are going to be able to take it to Denver. I know Denver's got a good defense, but they haven't really faced a level of offense that the Ravens have right now. I think this is a typical spot where Baltimore is furious that they lost that game last weekend, and they're going to come back and they're going to go hunting. And I think the Broncos, it's going to be weird. Because it's not going to be one of those games where I think the Broncos just get smoked. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there's going to be a little push-pull first half action where Denver's hanging tight. But I think in the second half, the Ravens are kind of just going to run away with it. And the final score is going to reflect as bigger than maybe the game actually was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times, and the numbers back it up as well. This Ravens defense is not the Ravens defenses we've been accustomed to. It's arguably a bad defense at this point. Some of the numbers I could pull up on this defense, like wide receiver ones are absolutely killing them. And like the Broncos, like this Ravens defense are going to like EPA per play. I just lost them where they go, like 26th in the NFL. Like we're talking like really, really bad defense at this point. Success rate, we're talking as low as they're 16th in success rate, a little bit better, but again, we've noticed that wide receiver ones are absolutely killing them. The whole Bo Nix thing, I'm out on Bo Nix. Like I think that he's done a good job to get out of the tier of like the Bryce Youngs and Anthony Richardson of the world, but obviously that's not saying too much. Like he is, performing like again, like respectively. But with that being said, again, like EPA numbers where he's still ranked 27th include rushing plays. And Bo Nix is 24th in straight EPA per play. And a lot of that has to do with some of the production he gets from his legs. Now, the Ravens have just been in these spots where they're massive favorites, have just been so underwhelming. I don't want really anything to do with this one from a side perspective at all. I make the game Ravens -10, so I actually do see some value at just laying the 9 if just based on my numbers. And especially obviously with the key number there too, if it gets up to 10, that's obviously 2 scores at that point, which does change things. But this Ravens team, they don't play with their food per se, but like they let up these late comebacks. They even going back to like earlier this year, Survivor last year, week 2, when they like lost a game, I think it was week against the Colts where they were like 10-point favorites even at home. Like they're not a team that I really trust to like win by margin, considering how bad their defense is. And Denver, back to the Sean Payton thing, like he is still a great head coach. And when you have a great head coach, you have an edge. Obviously, the Ravens have a great head coaching organization as well. So like it's not, I guess you can counteract that, but I don't think that the Broncos go to Baltimore and roll over and die by any means. Though I do 100% agree. Shout out Looser, that's my boy. Can't wait to see some more tennis going on from you, bro. But no, I don't see the Ravens. I don't see the Broncos rolling over and dying, and the Ravens are a team I have a hard time trusting to cover and win by margin frequently. So I'm just staying away from this one.
Fair enough. All right, next up, we got the Raiders and the Bengals. Bengals laying a big spread, 7.5. Eric, I'll let you take this one first.
Give me Cincy. I know that they lost, obviously, in bad fashion against the Eagles, but Johnny, we were talked about how I love the Eagles coming into the year. They obviously looked like crap to begin the year. They were obviously injured as well. Now, again, the Bengals defense is bad. So don't get me wrong. It's not like they put out this amazing performance and like shut out like the Chiefs or something like, or destroyed the Chiefs or something like that. Don't get me wrong. But this Bengals team to me is still real. Considering their schedule, looking at Bengals futures in the playoff to make the playoffs, I think it's still like plus 115-ish. I would 100% look to get involved in something like that. The Raiders are a dead team walking. We know that they always play the Chiefs relatively tough. That's a huge divisional game. There's so much like pride involved in that. But from a pure numbers perspective, also, I make this Cincy -8.5. Cincy teasers, give me all of them, and I would even lay the 7.
Yeah, I think, if you're Cincinnati, I don't know what really happened in that Eagles game. They come out hot. They get the touchdown. It was a long drive. They looked good. I mean, it's no secret that their defense is a mess, and it's been a mess this year, but I don't really like how the rest of the game went for them. They only scored 17 points, and their first drive went for 7, so I'm not really, understanding how they're able to just die and do nothing virtually the rest of the game. But, I do still believe Cincinnati is a team that's going to be dangerous come playoff time. Obviously, the defense is going to be the thing that's going to ultimately undo them. But the Raiders are not someone that I am overly concerned about. I will say they have this weird tendency to just kind of pop out in these spots that seem too big for them. I would expect a good game from Brock Bowers, pummel him with targets. But other than that, I feel like this should be one-way traffic. Cincinnati, this should be one of those games Jamar Chase blows up. If T. Higgins comes back. So I am in agreement with you. I would lay the 7.5 with Cincy. This probably won't make my circa millions where you have to pick 5. But, it'd be under consideration. But I think I do see 5 other games that I would take ahead of it, just in terms of like where I'm rating it.
No, definitely want to talk some more Eagles. Obviously, when we get to their matchup this week when they take the Jags. But I just do want to say, though, the Eagles defense, like they were relying also on a lot of younger players with some of their draft picks, and they're ascending. So we can get into that more. The Eagles are creeping back to being the team that I kind of expected them to be. So again, we can postpone the talks, but I don't think getting beat up by the Eagles is like, saying since he's dead. Like I literally said, I think you should look at Cincy futures and bet that they make the playoffs plus money because I think the Bengals are still a good team. But I think this Raiders team is abysmal. I make the game 8.5. Bengals teasers. Bengals even laying a 7.
Yeah, noteworthy. All right. Chargers, 1.5 point favorites at Cleveland. This is an interesting line here. The LA Chargers have looked relatively better than what I thought they would be. But I got news for you, dude. I think this Cleveland Browns team has been revived. I think Jameis Winston has breathed new life into him. We know from the 2019 season that was just absolutely electric. That Jameis Winston is probably the most entertaining player I think I've ever seen. When he's on, that kid is on. But when he's off, it's ugly. And you remember that 30-30 season he had with Tampa in 2019, which I had him in fantasy that year. I feel like this is a Cleveland spot for me. I'm not sold just yet, but looking at it, I think Winston obviously did have a lot of interceptable passes that were dropped, but I just felt like, and why I liked the Browns last week was because I felt everybody else around him was like, all right, finally we got a shot to win and compete. We have somebody that wants to be there, somebody that wants to battle. And I feel like that's an infectious energy that permeates throughout honestly a talented roster. I think the same thing can happen here. I don't think the Chargers are as good maybe as, what we've seen. But that's not to say that they're not solid. But I feel like Cleveland is going to maybe start getting some momentum going. And obviously it all comes down to if Jameis Winston plays clean or not. But I think the Browns at home here, I think this is an interesting spot for the Brownies.
Yeah, no. So I make the game Cleveland -1. So I'm literally right on market. But Cleveland and teasers are very appealing to me. The Chargers are not a team that I expect to win by margin against anybody who has a pulse. And I think this also goes back to our discussion on Anthony Richardson briefly. Part of this too is like when you have a guy like Deshaun Watson or in that case Anthony Richardson playing, like he's clearly not good enough, and there's clearly a person who is better literally in the locker room hanging out with the team. Like at some point you gotta say, I don't want to lose my team. Like if you start keep playing the crappy player, your wide receivers are going to stop really running their routes hard. Your offensive line is going to stop blocking as hard. And I think what actually in this matchup that I think is really, or what really propelled Cleveland last week and should be propelling Cleveland moving forward, is this offensive line was finally healthy for the first time in a couple of weeks. And this is an offensive line that's expected to be one of the best in football. Obviously, no team can really come or deal with cluster injuries to any positional group, especially the O-line. And Jameis Winston gets the ball out a lot more quickly than Deshaun Watson, who a lot of those sacks are on him. And yeah, you're going to get those balls that are just egregiously thrown by Jameis, and you're going to be sitting there like, what the hell are you thinking, Jameis? But I'm with you on the Chargers that this defense and team in general is overrated based on their level of competition that they've played so far. So Cleveland in a teaser, getting 7.5 at home, absolutely in love with. But I also like the over here. Obviously, we know Jameis Winston is an explosive play machine, which works well both ways. That also includes pick sixes or short fields for the defense or for the opposing offense after he throws an interception, or it creates big explosive plays, which obviously lead to early scores on the Cleveland side. And I talked about this for, I think, 3 weeks going now, Johnny. Justin Herbert is balling, absolutely balling. And yes, this Browns defense is good, but it's nowhere near as good as it was last year. Yeah, this Chargers wide receiver core is underwhelming, but Lad McConkey is really kind of breaking out. Justin Herbert is, like I said last week, unarguably, in my opinion, at least top 7 quarterback in the National Football League, and not like kind of just there. Like, obviously there are tiers to this. He's right below that tier of like really, really elite quarterback, but he is so good, and he's been playing out of his mind. The Chargers' philosophy as a team, yes, they've been running the football at the start of the season, but they've shifted a lot toward letting Justin Herbert, one of these great quarterbacks, throw the football, and they've been having success with him throwing the ball because he is great. So Cleveland teasers and overs are for this one is 2 great looks for me this week.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think just to brush up on the point about Justin Herbert, I think this kid is definitely, top 5 consideration. Let's not forget. I think what happens is stats tend to skew people's perceptions. Fantasy, all that stuff can change a person's thought process, especially recency bias. What's happening in real time? Like, his stats aren't jumping off the screen, but this is still a guy that's got an 8 TD to 1 pick ratio. He's taking care of the football. He's being honestly more of a game manager, but he's got that capability to step up as the guy when needed. And let's not forget, Justin Herbert is still a guy that threw for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns a few years ago. Like that, he's still that guy. It's just the way the team and the offense is now built is different. They're not a team that is right now gearing towards dropping back 40 times a game and throwing it like they used to.
But they're getting closer to it. Like, they were like literally run. No, now their neutral game pass scripts have increased. Like, I think that's a great thing of Harbaugh. We know Greg Roman, the OC there. We know what he did in Baltimore, where they never adjusted. Even when they would add receivers, he would just still run. I think Harbaugh said to Roman, like, no. Like, obviously you had Lamar, you kind of botched that. Justin Herbert doesn't have the same skill set with the running as Lamar, but Justin Herbert's pocket presence, his accuracy, his deep ball, like, Justin Herbert is awesome. And they're unleashing Justin Herbert, and the results have been speaking for themselves with his actual numbers, because the counting stats are actually looking really good. He's tracking up those yards, that TD-INT ratio that you just mentioned. So I think it's a recipe for points in Cleveland on Sunday.
Yeah, I do tend to agree. Miami Dolphins get the rematch at Buffalo. Currently a Royal Mint spot. Scales are tipping to Buffalo -6 right now, with a heavy vig on the -5.5 for the Bills. Let's be honest with ourselves here. This is a Royal Mint spot that if it closes there, I'm probably obliged to take it. But I think Buffalo's starting to finally find their groove. I think this is a team that is now figured out their identity crisis that they had earlier in the year with the Amari Cooper addition. That's big. James Cook has been very, very good this year. Allen has been playing at an MVP level. And honestly, dude, for all we know, this could be the year he finally gets it. And you know what, man? I thought Buffalo was on their way out. And obviously it's hard to say because you always have Josh Allen, but the team's roster honestly was probably the worst it's been in 3 or 4 years. But kudos to them, man. They've reinvented a way to be successful in the NFL, and thus far it's worked. I think the Bills win this game, and I'm going to take them unless it's a Royal Mint spot.
I agree. I actually make this game Buffalo -7.5, but I will asterisk that because my numbers, just because as I am, trying to learn these things, I'm not sitting here saying I'm the best numbers in the world. Everything is a work in progress for me. I think I have a hard time adjusting from Stu Huntley to Tim Boyle to back to Tua. I think those kind of things are things I need to improve upon. So I'm a little bit skeptical that I'm so correct with my number here, but That being said, like the best part about the Cooper thing has been so far, it's been for Khalil Shakir. And this Miami secondary is really beatable. And if Josh Allen, again, when teams that don't have that like amazing lockdown, like we saw with like that Ravens game, which is also just a terrible spot for Buffalo, where Josh can really pick and choose with Cooper, Shakir, mixing Kincaid. Obviously, James Cook is awesome. Obviously, Josh Allen can be superhuman at times with his legs and with his arm and all things considered. Miami is floating near just being a dead team walking. We've talked about ad nauseum this offseason about how this defense is going to take a step back. They lost so many talented players and they changed coordinators. Tua obviously looked good, but we talked about how it was a dream and matchup against Arizona. And it's not like he lit up the stat sheet, though. It's tough to expect him to do so. First game with a concussion. But again, it was a dream matchup. Arizona gets no pressure. Buffalo gets a good amount of pressure. Now, Ed Oliver's back in that rotation on the defensive line, probably trying to wreak some havoc. But Miami does play Buffalo pretty closely. Obviously, they got rolled in this first matchup, but prior to the season, like McDaniels had a good, thing going and trying to slow him down, but it didn't work to start this year. And again, this defense is just nowhere near as good as Miami's D was last year. And Buffalo, their secondary is, I think, very underrated still. I think it's still a good unit despite the lack of big names they have on it. And also, again, it comes down to stopping Tyreek Hill. And Buffalo has had their vast experience playing Tyreek Hill against Miami and also in his time in Kansas City. I do like an Achane game because Buffalo's run defense is tough, and now with the space, like it's literally apples to oranges with what Achane, his ability to get the ball in space when it was Snoop Huntley, and now with Tua in this spread offense and their ability to actually, throw a forward pass and scare that. So I do like Achane to run a little bit wild, but I definitely like Buffalo here. And as you mentioned as well, this game keeps ticking more and more in the Bills' favor. I'm seeing a lot more sixes out there now. I'm not expecting a ton of buyback, but a lot of sixes now for Buffalo. And I expect it to continue to move in that direction more than I would expect there to be buyback on Miami.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot more Buffalo movement throughout the rest of the week here. Quick comment here from my guy Crutch. My guy Crutch, good guy, loves the college baseball. Don't worry, buddy. We're going to be back soon. Breaking it down. Can't wait. Honestly, can't wait. Dallas Cowboys at the Atlanta Falcons, 2.5-point favorites here for Atlanta. Total of 51.5. Trending a little bit more towards 3. That 2.5 is going to cost you $1.22. Am I crazy for saying I think this might be a Dallas spot?
I don't think you're crazy at all. I'm 2.5. Like I make the game 2.5. The line is 2.5. So nothing glaring to me where I'm like, why am I so wrong? Or I think I'm right. I love this. Let's hammer this shit. Like nothing of that nature for me here. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I want to see because I do instinctually, I agree with you. Numbers wise, I don't, which is why I make my numbers. So I can sometimes tell myself you're being biased, you're missing this, you're missing that, and vice versa. But I want to hear your breakdown on this to see if you can convince me here on the Dallas spot because my gut tells me Dallas, though my numbers say no edge, leave it alone.
Well, I'll say this. I think, honestly, Dallas has had a lot of success on the road this year. They're 3-1. They lost, obviously, to the Niners, but they had a ferocious comeback. And I also think, with Atlanta, they're a little bit overrated. I mean, they've gotten some of these big performances from Kirk Cousins and, whether it's Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts finally had a breakout here. But ultimately, what I'm gonna see is CeeDee Lamb, I think, is going to be primed to have a good game. I feel like they finally started getting him going. Atlanta's pass defense obviously has some dogs in the secondary, but, this is a secondary that's not as good as we're led to believe. AJ Terrell's had some problems. You saw DK Metcalf go off against them. An alpha receiver one here in this spot is something that I would definitely take a look at. And honestly, I think the 51.5-point total might be a tad low here. I feel like Dallas, especially if they get Micah Parsons back, which is a TBD.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Just Atlanta has these tendencies to kind of just fall off the face of the earth. We saw it against Seattle, and even though Dallas we don't really like, I think this is an opportunity where the Cowboys are going to be able to get some stops against a Falcons offense that is definitely hit or miss.
Yeah, I don't think the Dallas – I mean, obviously I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are good. I've talked about this for weeks, for months at this point, but I also don't think the Atlanta Falcons are good. talked about this for a long time as well. Defense, like you said, is not like they keep the ball in front of them. They don't want to let you beat them with big plays, but I think Dallas will be fine with that. I think they'll be able to funnel the ball to CeeDee Lamb, which, as we know, when Dallas can do that, their offense looks good. When they can't, it's tough. Obviously, Dallas' inability to run the ball has been tough, but Atlanta Falcons are not a team that gets pressure. And obviously, Dak Prescott is a very pressure-sensitive quarterback, as most quarterbacks are, but they are 30th in pressure rate, Atlanta. So not having that factor to like slow down the Dak to CD, connection is going to be tough for Atlanta. And again, like, can the Falcons just run it with Bijan and find some success a la like the 49ers did and what most teams do to Dallas? Yeah, I think they could. But if Micah Parsons comes back, I think he's going to be able to wreak havoc on Kirk Cousins, who, obviously had a good game last week and has had some good weeks, some mediocre weeks. Obviously throw week 1 out of because he was literally coming back from the injury against that Steelers defensive line. I obviously tossed that game kind of out. It's not really formulating my opinion there. But no, like I think that I'm looking at my ratings really quick. I have the Falcons rated, where is Atlanta, an 8.75, Dallas 9.5, and then obviously you have the home field there for Atlanta, which I only make 1.75. It's not really a big thing. Leads me to Dallas plus 2.5, which is on market. But I don't think it's going to get to 3. If it got to 3, I would definitely like Dallas, and Dallas and teasers I would be interested in, though the total is high, which makes teasers a little bit less valuable. But I can see it being a Dallas spot, and nothing that I'm running to the window to bet just yet. But no, I think that this is appropriately priced and should be an interesting one, honestly.
I think it's tipping the scales towards 3, and maybe it doesn't get there, but something about Dallas in this spot here is a little intriguing to me. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it because we're both of the belief that we don't like Dallas. We don't think they're good. I think there's going to be an opportunity to score a lot of points. The Cowboys' run defense is terrible, and I think there's a spot where Bijan and Algier can get going. But as well, Atlanta has struggled with wide receiver ones. Every wide receiver one that they faced, with the exception of this past Sunday because Tampa ran out of the receivers, has either had 80 yards or a touchdown or both. You know what I mean? So there is an opportunity to get around on them, especially if CeeDee Lamb gets back to that 17 target kind of game that he had on Sunday and what they were feeding him last year. I don't think Atlanta's defense is necessarily something that I would be frightened of. And they've been missing that pass rush presence since John Abraham. I mean, they had that 1 year of Vic Beasley in 2016, but outside of that, they don't really have a guy that is designed to get those 15 sacks in a year. It's one of the more bizarre things. So the lack of pass rush also hurts the secondary because they have more time that they have to cover. This is one of those games where I think Atlanta kind of lets down a little bit. I don't know what it is. It's just, I think it's a tough matchup for the Falcons defense because I think CeeDee Lamb is going to dog walk them. But ultimately, I think the 51.5, the over is definitely something that I would also be looking at.
Oh, for sure. I don't know who stops anybody, honestly, in that game.
Yeah. Washington, a game you're going to be going to. Washington is at the Giants this week. That rematch where the Commanders won in week 2, only scoring no touchdowns. What was it, 7 field goals, and they still won. 3.5 spot for us. I think it's quite easy. We're taking our favorite number, but we're also taking a big matchup advantage for Washington. Jaden Daniels, nuts on the table, ice in his veins, an MVP type of performance coming back. He is nowhere close to 100%, battling a rib injury, guts it out all game against a tough Chicago defense. And in the bleak moment after giving up the touchdown, Washington is virtually done, but Jaden Daniels says, no, I'm him. Launches 65 yards downfield for a Hail Mary success. That is what we're going to be looking at when Jaden Daniels lifts that MVP trophy this year. That play right there that propelled the Commanders to stardom. Give me Washington minus 3.5.
Give me Washington minus 3.5. It's obviously the Jaden Daniels matchup. Brian Robinson's going to feast. Jaden's going to feast. Terry McLaurin should do well. Like the thing about Washington too, like they barely beat the Bears, so they absolutely dominated that game. But the problem with Washington when they have played these tighter games, especially that game, like you mentioned, in week 2 against the Giants, which they should have lost if the Giants didn't lose their field goal kicker realistically, because they had to go for 2 and Washington was able to stop them. But the ascension of this Washington defense, I'm not going to say it's real as in like they're all of a sudden a top, 12 unit. No, absolutely not. But there's a vast difference of being 32nd in defense like they were last year versus being like 21st.
22.
Exactly, 20th. That gap is probably bigger than it's definitely bigger than going from like 20th to like 16th. You know what I mean? So the improvement that Washington has had defensively, the defensive line has been playing out of their mind. And obviously John Allen is out, but these young kids, they had Fidarian Mathis they drafted a few years ago who dealt with injuries. He's playing well. Johnny Newton, rookie out of Illinois, he's playing his ass off. Frankie Louvu in this hybrid end linebacker role, playing his ass off. And the team camaraderie, it seems like a college team. And I say that with all in an amazing way. They love each other. They play hard for each other. Noah Brown, in his interview in the locker room after they gave him the game ball for catching that Hail Mary, first thing he says is, yeah, like, love you boys. This win was on the defense. Like, they are fully a complete team, and the ascension of this defense cannot be overstated. Malik Neighbors, though, should definitely run wild. I think he should have another big game. Had those issues with drops, but playing elite, legitimate wide receiver ones, especially ones who get funneled the football like Neighbors, is still going to give Washington problems. They haven't faced a guy like that in a few weeks to like really emphasize that. The last one to do that was Zay Flowers. Who is an animal, don't get me wrong. Zay Flowers is a very good football player, but Malik Neighbors is obviously en route to being awesome. But I think the way Daniel Jones is playing is just absolutely awful. Jaden Daniels and co should get whatever they want. And the defense, had a new coordinator and basically like 6 new starters, honestly, on defense this year. Like, it's going to take more than 2 weeks to get it going. We're in week 9, and the numbers that they've put up have been very respectable, of course, against the Carolina team. Though it was Andy Dalton for most of the game, so take that as you will. And then this Bears team, who had a couple of big offensive outbreaks prior to that. This is the first time Washington's leaving the state of Maryland in over a month, but they're only going to New York, so I don't think it's going to be like a potential travel.
They're going to New Jersey. Stop.
They're going to the Meadowlands. They're going to New Jersey. But no, the Commanders team, I make this game 4.5, 3.5, and I'll be in attendance. I'm cooking a same game beauty for that. Let's go Commies.
Love to see it. You better come slide after. I'm not that far from the stadium, so maybe we'll do something for the Sunday night game if you are around.
Sure.
Yeah, listen, dude, I think Washington is a team that both of us liked coming into the year. I think the both of us thought there was a definite possibility they can sneak into that last wild card spot. We both had a feeling that the Commanders were going to be able to do something this year. But I don't think either of us really expected them to even contend for the division. I mean, to be honest, did you really think they were going to win the division?
Considering how high I was on the Eagles, absolutely not. But we definitely were in agreement that I had Washington as my 7th seed. So
yeah.
The ascension, I'm not shocked at. But the fact that they're the number 2 team in the NFC right now, again, they have played a relatively easy schedule. They will continue to play a relatively easy schedule. So just keep that in mind. I'm not sitting here saying, especially as a Commanders fan, we're going to the Super Bowl, bro. We're better than the Lions. Like, no. I'm not saying those words. Don't get me wrong.
You said it. No, you said it. You said it.
Are they fun as hell? And do they play as a team? And do they have the makings of an offense that is elite? We've already seen that. And is their defense, if they play at league average or even just slightly below league average, is that good enough to keep them in a game against anybody? Not saying win or beat, but keep them within 7. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's the thing, right? The Washington secondary was disgustingly bad last year. And listen, it's still not that good, but it has taken a jump. And Dan Quinn is obviously a huge reason why. He's the guy that's led one of the best defenses of all time in Seattle. He's a guy that turned around Dallas' defense a few years ago. Obviously, Atlanta, their defense, in my opinion, throughout his tenure was very underwhelming. But during that Super Bowl year, 2016, their defense actually was top 10. So to see the turnaround is definitely not a surprise. Obviously, it is still beatable. But, listen, they're slowly building. They're slowly getting there. And, listen, I'm rooting for Washington. I got a Jaden Daniels MVP ticket to cash, big dog.
Fuck yeah.
All right, Chicago Bears at Arizona, redemption time. The Cardinals. Dude, let me tell you something. The Cardinals in 2022 and 2023, there was nobody in the world that knew the Cardinals better than I did those 2 years. There's nobody. Like, I knew what they were going to do before they were going to do it. It just, I could read any side, whether it was the right, a win or a loss, I knew what was going on with Arizona. This year has been a complete coin toss. Complete coin toss. I've been on the wrong side badly of a couple of their games, and I've been on the right side beautifully of a couple of their games. This is one I'm not really feeling here. I want to say early look leans the Bears, though. Remember last year where the Bears blew out the Cardinals? It was actually unfortunate because that was the game I did not take Chicago in Circus Survivor. Instead, I took the Broncos. I have to relive that one. But I think I like the Bears here in this spot. Arizona's defense is so susceptible. We talked about this. They have one of the worst defenses. Honestly, they should have lost that Miami game. That was like a weird safety happened that kind of turned the whole thing around. They still allowed 28 points. I think Caleb and this offense can get back to cooking here. Give me the Bears, and Arizona should have a much tougher time with this defense than they did Miami.
Yeah, and I'm impressed with the Cardinals. Coming in, I didn't expect them to – I expected it to be like a 6-win team, and obviously they're on that pace. They surely can just still be a 6-win team, but they played a pretty high level of comp, and they played well. Because, again, like you think about the Commanders game week 3 and they get smoked. It's like back then it's like, oh, they just played the Commanders, shitty game, whatever. But now, yeah, they got smoked, but it looks like not as bad of a loss because of how good Washington is. So there's a lot of things that change throughout the course of the season, especially when you're basing things off priors. But digression aside, I still make this game minus 0.25. So I see clear value in the Bears here. And I'm in agreement with you. Like, Eberflus, awful coach. Chicago, awful organization. The way that they're running things and doing things is clearly, despite the fact that they have a winning record currently, they're a team that I don't think is for real as like we think Washington, for example, is for real than playoff really worthy. Chicago, clearly not. But with that being said, again, like a situation where Cardinals get no pressure. Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and co. They should be able to move the football. Like Caleb Williams, he came alive at the end of that game. I think it's twofold. I think one, it's because he's good. Like I'm not going to sit here and say Caleb Williams stinks. I'm not going to say he's great. He's good at football and is going to get better at football. But the Commanders' defensive scheme and the pressure they got on him really threw him off, and I don't think they expected that. But we know Arizona's defensive front is awful, and we know that's going to be a tough situation. Him not getting pressure on Caleb is really going to help him be better. So I do agree that this is a Bears spot. My numbers like it. I definitely lean Chicago here. It's not something I'm going to bet yet, or I'm dying to. I do another show tomorrow where I'll talk some more concrete looks as for obviously approaching, the week. We like to get these things out relatively early on some spots to try to beat some numbers and beat the closing line. But I'm with you that this is a Bear spot. I think the Cardinals, I do give them kudos for how they've played. But as we've always said, high variance team, consistently inconsistent, shitty performance, good performance. I think we're due for a shitty performance.
Yeah, for sure. Jacksonville, Philadelphia. Philly is a 7.5-point favorite at home against a Jacksonville team that just lost Christian Kirk for the year. Brian Thomas was projected, I should say, to miss a few weeks, but now they're saying there's a chance that he can get up this weekend. But even still, I can't. I told you I can't back the Jaguars. Yeah, they somehow managed to cover the spread. I think they got outplayed most of the game on Sunday, and they somehow managed to kind of cut it down. And that's one of those. I don't think it was a bad side to take Green Bay with laying the points, but it's not something I would expect. And now you lose one of your best offensive players. I like Philly here.
Believe in teaser, plain and simple. Especially when we're seeing these sevens, and not to say this as a conspiracy theorist, but like things right themselves in the NFL. Examples: all the favorites losing outright. then the favorites are crushing. All the games going under, then the totals are going over. Like, things correct themselves. The market corrects itself over the course of the season. So I think that the fact that the teasers have been kind of crappy for, I mean, they've definitely been rebounding, but they had their time where, no big favorite was safe. I think the Eagles are a safe big favorite in a teaser. The injuries to Jacksonville cannot be overstated. And like I mentioned prior, that I kind of stopped myself because we were, not on the Eagles yet. In success rate and EPA on defense from week 5 to now, obviously another small sample, but NFL is literally a sport of small samples broken up into even smaller samples. Defense has been ascending. We saw the pressure rates that they got on the Giants. We saw their secondary play well against Jamar Chase. Obviously, no T. Higgins there to consider, but we saw the secondary take a step up. We know that they have Cooper DeJean and the other young cornerback, I'm forgetting his name right now, that they drafted, like young players into a new system that they had drafted highly that are finally coming into their own. So I think the Eagles are not as good as I had them rated as the number 1 team coming in, but don't look now. But the Eagles are very good at football and are still in that Super Bowl teams are here. Like, they're probably right here. And that's my opinion here. And I think the Eagles are back to being a very, very good football team.
Remains to be seen. I know we have differing opinions on the Eagles, but let's go to a team that I have no differing opinion on, and that is the Detroit Lions. Laying 3.5 at Green Bay, one of the very few outdoors games that the Lions will play this year. This is now interesting because Jordan Love is not definitely playing this Sunday. He sustained an injury. I think it was a groin injury against the Jags. He ended up returning enough to lead the game-winning drive late. They said, quote unquote, I think it's realistic that he plays. If I'm being honest, knowing the magnitude of what this game means for the division, I'm going to say he probably ends up gutting it out and plays. Josh Jacobs, I think, is dealing with something as well. Again, I would think he probably plays. I'm handicapping this as if Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs are going to be in the lineup. Obviously, Jordan Love is more important. 3.5. I think this is this again. It's a 3.5 spot, but it doesn't matter the number. I think the Lions are going to win, and I think they win by a touchdown here. I don't.
No, I see it.
I was just going to say, I think the way the Lions are playing, I think their scheme is just dominating people. I think there's just too many weapons to contend with. I think their defense has done a very good job at finding ways to get it done in the absence of Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know if the outdoors elements, I haven't checked the weather yet, but if the weather's clear, I don't really see any way for the Lions or the Packers to win this game.
Some light rain expected in Green Bay.
How light?
Take a look at the radar and the forecast to make sure on Sunday. So obviously something to note because we know Jared Goff isn't a fan of the elements, but the Lions will beat you so many different ways. That being said, I've been lower on the Packers than market. I've talked about it many times here. I'm coming around. I was reluctant to say that the Packers were in that similar tier of the Eagles and even higher in literally Super Bowl contenders. I was reluctant to say that, but I think that they really are at this point. Obviously, we have to see what Jordan Love has, what Jordan Love, if he's playing or not, it's obviously going to be huge. Their entire game plan with him and Willis are literally apples and oranges. As we talked about with Willis, they're one of the run-heaviest teams naturally. With Love, they sling the football down the field naturally. That's what Love loves to do. So I do think I agree with you that this could just be a Lions smash spot again. All things do, what comes up must come down eventually. So the Lions, if it's not this week, I don't want to say are due because I hate to say it that way, but just progression-wise are going to have a game where they don't look as good as they've looked, especially, again, against the Tennessee Titans is not as impressive. But no opinion on something. I'm not betting anything just yet, but I just will say that the Lions have been upgraded for me. Believe it or not, I still have them now as the second best team in football. Still have Baltimore slightly ahead of them, but Detroit is my second best team. And I have the Packers as my seventh best team, which I kept them around 11th, 12th, 13th. And I think that I'm ready to say that I'm wrong on them and that they're really good. So I think it'll be fun as hell.
Yeah. Rams Seahawks will be fun as hell as well. The Rams, man, all systems look look like it's go. Big Daddy Stafford under center. Cup Daddy's back. Puka is back. Kyron's running wild. Listen, I think part of me here thinks Seattle is going to rebound. They got smoked at home. Obviously, I need to know what's going on with DK Metcalf first. But even though I think Seattle is going to bounce back here, and I think this is a game that's probably higher scoring because the Seattle defense has not been good. It is not the defense I thought we were going to see be one of probably the top 10 units in football this year, maybe top 12. It has not looked like that, and that is a big problem. I think this is a Ram spot for me, and I think it's going to be higher.
Ram spot. I really do think the Rams. We saw it on Thursday when they have the four-headed monster of Staff Daddy, Cup, Puka, and Kyron ready to rock. They are as good of an offense as any offense in football. And they're young defensive ends. Jared Verse, the other kid they have from Florida, some of their linebackers as well. Like, they're playing really good football. And Seattle, I hit on them 2 weeks ago when we went against each other last week. You took the crown there. I'm ready to. I've downgraded Seattle significantly. I have. They're just not good. They're defense that I expected to be better with Mike McDonald, and obviously we attributed a lot of their issues to injuries, though we can't even say that anymore because they're getting a little bit healthier and they're still not performing to expectation. Seattle shouldn't have probably got as blown out. We talked about it off air, but if you watch that game, you saw two terrible goal line trips for the Seahawks. Not just talking red zone at the 20. We're talking at the goal line, at the cusp of scoring, fumble, and then or a bad snap, and then just some misplayed plays. But I'm ready to say that Seattle's not good. I'm ready to say that the Rams are back, and this offense is terrifying. The Seahawks defense is not. The Rams defense can get pressure. Seattle's offensive line has been struggled. Gino, he's good. He's a good football player, but good is not going to be good enough here. Stafford's awesome. This team is back. Give me the Rams.
Let me ask you a question here. While we're on the subject of the Rams, they're 5-1 to win their division.
Playoff, I'd be looking at the playoff market for a little bit safer, but yes, I'm interested.
Here's the one bugaboo that we have on the Rams, which is why it could be difficult. You're at Seattle this week, then you come home to play Miami. Then you're at New England, which, that's a tough travel spot. Then you're home to the Eagles. Then you got to go to New Orleans. Then you're home to the Bills, at the Niners, at the Jets, another tough travel spot. Come home to play Arizona, and then you play Seattle. I mean, this is definitely, even some of their easier matchups are tough because of travel. But, I don't think it's unrealistic to see them win this division. But what I will say is I think it's going to come down to San Francisco or the Rams. So I think something that's actually could be very profitable is throw like 3 units on San Francisco at -110 to win. And then you throw a unit on the Rams. Chances are obviously you're risking if Arizona or Seattle finds a way, but quite frankly, I don't think either of those teams win. So you're probably netting yourself some money there, potentially, a little over a unit and a half. Something to think about. Colts, we talked about it. It's a Royal Mint spot at Minnesota. I'm going Indianapolis all the way here. Joe Flacco's back. I do not like the direction Minnesota's trending in. I don't think they're done by any stretch. I felt like, during their 5-0 streak where they were taking down the Niners, they were taking down the Texans in pretty jarring fashion, that they are actually a good team with a good defense. But I think some of this stuff has regressed to the mean where they're not as good as originally said. But I don't think they're as bad as a lot of people, even including myself, thought that they would be this year. I think they're somewhere in the middle. I still think this is a playoff team most likely. But I don't think it's a team that we should be paying as much respect to as market makers were in the first few weeks of the season. So give me the Indianapolis Colts here. I think Minnesota is going to come back and win this ball game and get the ship right. But the Colts are going to cover this Royal Mint spot.
Yeah, I make it 5-5. So if it gets to 6, I see clear value on Indianapolis. I think
Colts
you said that
covered the Royal Mint spot last week, Eric. Closed at 5. They closed and they won, or they covered.
Very nice. Yeah, no, I don't have much to add. I think that the Vikings are definitely a good football team, but I think the Colts with the one thing that I do think the edge here is that O'Connell, um, against this Gus Bradley defense could be a factor. I think this total might be low at 46.5. I think the Vikings defense is getting a little bit of too much credit for like they have number one pass CPA, but we saw the Rams obviously take it to them. We know Flacco is going to be able to move the football on them. But on the flip side, I think the Vikings have no issue moving the football back on the Colts. So I think that this total I'd be more interested in. I think it's a little too low. I like the over.
Yeah, fair point. Last but not least, Tampa Bay, 8.5 at Kansas City. I mean, I think I probably like an over here at 45.5 above all else. Tampa's secondary has been so bad. D-Hop coming into the fold here. Kansas City should be able to run the ball, but above all else, I think Mahomes and this offense can move it. Listen, I think Tampa is going to be able to find a way to score. That's what they do. I think Tampa, you could probably put down for 20 points. That being said, I think Tampa probably wins something like 27-20 or 28-21, that sort of thing. In terms of the spread, I mean, on paper, you want to take Kansas City, but we know how they are with these big numbers. Just there's something always strange about Tampa or Kansas City in these big spreads. Early look for me is I would probably lean towards taking the Bucs with the points.
Another spot where it's another teaser leg. Like I've been mentioned so many. Obviously, I have mentioned some underdogs as well, so I'm not just like laying every chalky guy and saying like, oh, just bet the favorites in the teaser. But Chiefs is a teaser leg I definitely look at. I think the Buccaneers, we already talked so much crap about the Falcons defense, and that's why the Buccaneers, made things interesting with Baker and the lack of receiving weapons they have. But this is a whole other animal in Arrowhead against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. And I think that they'll be able to get enough pressure on Baker with the lack of overall weapons they have to, make Baker's life difficult and make things hard for Tampa to move the football. So to me, this is a Chiefs spot all the way. I don't think that it's a game where like Mahomes is going to absolutely I think it's a game where Mahomes can absolutely just rip them as well. We know this Buccaneers secondary is bad. We know Mahomes' overall numbers have been mediocre at best, though. Again, he's Patrick Mahomes. If you think he's toast, you're tripping. But Chiefs in a teaser, another thing where I wouldn't honestly think twice about. Chiefs Eagles, Chiefs Browns. We mentioned as an underdog if you want to get some points there. Or I mentioned as these are things that I like. Chiefs Bengals, all four of them, even in a four-legger at good enough odds. If you get a book with good enough odds, that's what I'm looking at.
4 legs sounds pretty good. Let's do it. There's no real tutty looks out yet so far this week, but I think I probably would be interested in maybe a Malik Neighbor score, possibly.
Sure.
Actually, scratch that because Daniel Jones doesn't throw touchdowns at home. But Jamar Chase obviously is somebody that I like. But if we're taking a look at somebody a little bit further down the board here, do we think maybe Demarcus Robinson does it again and gets back into the end zone against Seattle secondary?
Definitely. He scored 2. Obviously, that's what makes this team somewhat dynamic now. Is because obviously Puka came in and nobody expected it, and he absolutely ripped it up. And Cooper Kupp, he had his decent targets, so not like a vintage Cooper Kupp game by any means. But no, I would take a look at Demarcus Robinson. But like you mentioned, considering the state of some of these boards, I haven't dove into touchdown props. But again, games that I like there to be points in. Dallas, Atlanta, I'm sure the odds will be a little bit juiced, but parlay. Commies, that they're, getting the ball in the red zone against the Giants. I would look at Commanders, and I would also look at Neighbors, even though the Daniel Jones situation, Neighbors is great, and you got to throw one eventually. Browns, Chargers, another Cedric Tillman look maybe, or even a Lad again for the Chargers who went off last week. Another game I expect some points. And as we mentioned, Rams, Seahawks, I'd be looking at so many different people. Colts, Vikings as well on Monday night. That's another game I think TV score is obviously price dependent, but will be places where I'd be looking for guys to reach the end zone multiple times.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great one, and it's always great having Eric Pauly come join us. We appreciate everybody for taking the time today. We know the World Series is starting. Eric and I already had the Dodgers coming into the series. Best of luck. Have a great week, and let's cash some winners and have a big one.
Let's do it. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.